Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Anna Stevens. Anna, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm really good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's excellent. I always love when I'm reading somebody's books and I'm like, oh, I really want to get them on. And I just send out a random Twitter or TikTok message. So I was so happy that, we could connect. And obviously, I'm sure everybody knows by now that, I have a crazy schedule with the baby and everything. So I was so happy with people that were able to fit so many people in this week, such as yourself. So it makes my writing time a lot better by the end of the week. You get so many ideas from you guys. I'm just like, start going. So really glad we could get you in today. So I really appreciate it.
Cool, no problem.
Yeah, of course. So we'll start with that first question. It's a fan favorite. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Okay. I would say that probably up until I got my agent, it was pretty standard in as much as I kept writing stuff, sending it out, getting it rejected, sulking, having a drink, and then starting the process again. It took me 13 years from my first draft to get to my agent. So that's 13 years. And almost 40 agent rejections to get to that point. So I'm glad that I'm really stubborn, because if I wasn't, I probably would have given up a long time ago.
Yeah.
I suppose the one thing that people think is a little bit strange about my writing journey is that every one of those submissions was for the same book. So over the course of 13 years, what I did was I wrote and rewrote and rewrote and rewrote the book that went on to become Godblind, my debut. So every other writer that I've ever spoken to about this has said, I would have given up on that story and just written something else. That's why people say that they've got like 5 or 6 manuscripts that are just sitting in a drawer somewhere. And I don't have that, because I just kept on, because that was the story that I was determined to tell. And those were the characters that got under my skin. And I always said if I was going to get a book published, that was the one it was going to be. Which is a little bit mad, because arguably I might have found success a little bit earlier if I hadn't have done it that way. But things are what they are. And then in 2016, my agent, Harry Illingworth, he put out a tweet saying that he was looking for Joe Abercrombie-esque novels, big epic fantasy novels, quite gritty. And it was around Christmas time, and I saw this tweet and I tweeted back. And I just said, I'm not exactly Joe Abercrombie, but I'm possibly in the same ballpark. And he just responded saying, yeah, great, send it to me. Which, after I picked myself off the floor, I was like, oh my God, an agent just expressed interest in me. And then I submitted, so I sent it off to him. And then life got in the way, and I didn't check my email for a week. And when I did, I found that he'd emailed me after about 2 days requesting the rest of the manuscript.
Oh, wow.
So then I had an absolute panic, because I thought, oh my God, I should have responded within like 12 seconds to his email, not, a week later. So I sent sort of a groveling apology and the rest of the manuscript. I'd had a couple of requests for full manuscripts by that point, but I had a really strange good feeling about this one. I don't know why. It was as if the stars were aligning, but I actually put the agency's phone number in my mobile phone, which I'd never done before. And then I was at work one day and my phone rang, and I looked down and it said, the agency. a meeting room in the office, and I had the most surreal conversation of my life, which was, I love the book and I'd really like to represent you. And yeah, so that was how I got signed. And then it was pretty much a whirlwind from there. We sold Godblind and the sequel, so we sold the trilogy within about 5 months, I think. So Harry and I had done some work on it. And then he basically sent what was pretty much a draft, a better draft, but still a draft, off to Harper Voyager. And then they preempted. So things just snowballed, and he was phoning up and saying, hey, they want this, but I'm going to ask them for more. And I was like, oh my God, can you do that? I didn't really know anything about the publishing world, so it was a really steep learning curve. And then, yeah, so first trilogy came out, and then they bought the second trilogy. And then I started doing work for a couple of other IPs as well. So Black Library for Games Workshop, and latterly Marvel Comics. And then the pandemic happened, and like publishing just went to shit, basically. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, you're fine. We put a rating. You're all right.
Okay.
And it's totally true. So, it really did.
It really did. So we managed to scrape out the first book of my new series in the November 2020. And then like all the delays finally caught up with me. And so the sequel is now not due out until February next year, which is sad. And I feel like, we've lost a lot of momentum from that, but so has every other author who's had a delay.
Yeah.
So you've just got to trust that your readers are still there, and do interviews like this in order to try and come to me.
There were some people where like I had Scott Drakeford on, and like he was one person that was like working with a while for Tor on his, and then he was like right about to release, and I want to say he was like supposed to be the end of March for 2020. And then he was like, so he just released like this winter, and I was just like, oh my gosh, and I've talked to quite a few people where they're in the totally same boat. It's like but I do feel like so for instance, like I love R.A. Salvatore. I wish Elaine Cunningham would come back and write some more of her own Forgotten Realms. Like I wish that like she was my favorite, just amazing writer. And but like for instance, I had picked up everything that he had for a while, and Bob took a break from the Forgotten Realms, came back with the Drizzt stuff, and I think it was probably like a 6-year gap, and I'm like, yep, give me. And I said to my friend, I was like, I don't really care how long it is. I'm like, there's so many things to read, or I feel like I don't have the problem where I used to have, where I was just going after 6 authors. Now I feel like 2 years passes and I barely notice. But Scott's like, well, when you're the author, you'll definitely notice. I'm like, that's fair. So yeah, definitely was not fun for the industry, just like you were saying.
No, definitely not.
Well, I got to say, I absolutely love your cover for Godblind, Dark Soul, and Bloodchild. Like those are just, I love graphic design, and those are just absolutely stunning.
Can you see?
Oh yeah. They look absolutely amazing.
Cool. I'll do all 3.
Oh really? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool. That's super cool. I also
because I love the covers myself, so any chance to show them off, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's awesome. Well, I also really liked I think the first book I read of yours, which I was just trying to figure out earlier on Goodreads if I ever end up finishing. I know it was like in 2 different I was switching from one grad school getting done, and then I had to go back to school again. It was like crazy. But the Stone Knife, I absolutely love that one too. Like that one really stood out to me. I was like, oh, that's a really cool one. So
yeah, I've been really, really lucky with my cover art for all of my books. So the Stone Knife was really nice because it was very different to the first trilogy. It was, obviously it's got that real lush feeling going on.
Yeah.
and the, you know, the little hints of the magic and the songstone and stuff like that in the cover, which I really liked. And then the Jaguar Path, which is the sequel's coming out in February.
Cool.
It's like is riffing on the same sort of cover. It's the same sort of basic design, but like the color scheme's different, and there's a few different points to it and stuff. So I think they're all three of them are going to hang together really well.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, very lucky with my covers. I love them.
Yeah, and like Serpent of the Dead, I just like that one too. To me, like the first time I saw it, I actually, I don't even think I made it home. Like I was like at the store and somebody shared it, and I think actually it was either Scott Oden or Richard Lee Byers shared it. I can't remember which one of them shared it first. So I remember seeing both of them shared it the same day, and I was like, "What is that?" And then one of my friends told me, and I actually pre-ordered it. I was like, "Yeah, I need that." And then I remember like sitting around waiting on like Barnes and Noble or whatever to contact me, and finally like, yeah, it's ready. I'm like, oh, cool. So yeah, it was really neat. I love the world that you and like Richard have. I feel like you guys have done a really good job like immersing yourselves with, you know, the characters, but like I've just like adding so much to them. I mean, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, well, who else could, you know, you guys use in the Marvel universe to do that? And it's just, I don't know. I was just talking to this about another author about, you know, like I felt like, you know, it like Marvel's such a great mix of science fiction and fantasy, and you know, Asgardians in particular. So I feel like, you know, there's probably some, you know, other cool novels out there, you know, like Hercules is a good example, you know, that they have like a lot of cool, you know, villains and, you know, different heroes and stuff like you guys were able to intermix and stuff. But yeah, super cool. I never would have thought that would have been something I wanted, and now I'm like, I need more. So I hope that they're all doing well for you guys, so that way I get to read more of them. So, and I always love Sif and Brunhild just in general because I'm a history teacher. So
cool.
They're definitely two of my favorites. A lot of people have used them in the last, I'd say, like 10 years, and I just love it because it always adds, you know, to, because you always got to wonder, you know, like Thor gets his time and everything, but I just always like these other characters and, you know, from mythology and stuff, and I'm like, there's a lot of cool people there. So I like that you guys were able to, you know, use the, you know, the Marvel comics, but the mythology, and, you know, really put, you know, some cool stories together. I really think it adds to, you know, the genre just in general, and just kind of adds a new facet to it, because I don't think a lot of people would have thought to do that. So I think that that's a really smart move.
And I think because Marvel Comics has been going for such a long time, and they have reinvented the character so many times in so many different ways, you know, there's so many different universes and multiverses and parallel worlds, and they die and get resurrected, and you know, it's almost as if like these are the archetypes, this is what you can write within, but other than that, you know, go ham, you can do anything you like. So that has been like, it's been really interesting and really quite freeing in a way. I mean, yes, there are things you're allowed to do and things you're not allowed to do, and they are very, you know, they are very strict on that, and that's as it should be, because they own that world and they own those characters. But because they have regenerated themselves so many times, they're quite happy for you to put those characters in a situation and just say, well, yeah, I'm sure that would work in one of the universes, and they go, yeah, okay, that's fine. So in that respect, it's been really exciting, very exciting project to work on. And you know, I mean, just seeing that little logo next to my name is kind of like, you know, mind-blowing.
But
yeah, I am actually working on another Legends of Asgard novel at the moment.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which I can't talk about other than to say it does exist. And
well, that's fine. Now I can breathe, so that's okay.
Yeah, look out for it next spring, hopefully. Late spring.
Awesome. Well, that's super cool. I feel like, like I had talked to a few people about, who did Warhammer, who like Rob J. Hayes, I know did some stories for them. And I think it was 2 or 3 short stories. And he was like, oh my gosh, he was like, they were so crazy. Like, like you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. And he like was really like, because I think he said at the time, like he had to really read up, but there was just so many rules and this and that. So I really, you got my mind whirling now. I'm like, well, could Richard's like Hamdall and like Idris Elba like movie Hamdall come together and do like the coolest buddy cop story of all time? Like it just like blew my mind now. Like and now it's just like there's so many more possibilities, like you said, with the multiverse. Like, oh my gosh, like
well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, if they did a tie-in series, or like maybe they do a tie-in TV series which brings Marvel cinema and Marvel comics together.
Oh, that'd be so I mean,
cool. Yeah, you could have like so many different versions turn up, couldn't you?
Well, that's why everybody likes Spider-Man Into the Multiverse, and even like the original 90s cartoon, the Amazing Spider-Man one, when they did their version of that, you had Noir Spider-Man, you had 2099, I think that's why it was so cool, is you're like, oh, this is really neat. Like there's all these different types of Spider-Man, and that was the first time I believe that Spider-Woman was on there as well, and was brought in from the previous comic book. So it really made you think like, oh, this is really neat, and I think now today in particular, that would be, I just think it'd be really cool, and they already started to do some of that. So yeah, it'd be really neat to just to combine, kind of like DC did, on like the Arrowverse or whatever, where they had theirs. Like that was cool to see, different Brandon Routh as a Superman at the same time as Tom Welling, at the same time as whoever like their current one was. And I always find those ones really interesting for Marvel and DC. So yeah, that'd be interesting if they did that. I would definitely read those novels.
Yeah.
I always want them to go back to the Secret Wars from like the like the original comic books and do novels for those, because I feel like there's so many cool stories and people from like that time period. And that's where I was saying to my friend is, I said, well, like Anna and Richard doing these, I said that really, opens the door for, other possibilities. And, I think it'd be cool to read about, Black Panther's dad, like T'Challa's dad, when he was the Black Panther. Like I thought that'd be cool to read a novel about him. So I just think it's cool because I think it really opens up, like a whole, I really think honestly, it's almost like you guys are doing like a whole new genre, like, I know they've had superhero, fiction, in Marvel and DC, but it really opens up, I think, a whole different type of story within, that genre itself. So
yeah, I agree, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Super cool. So we mentioned a little bit, but for our audience, so what genres have you or do you currently write in right now?
Okay, so I suppose the main one is epic fantasy. So that is what the Goblin trilogy and the Songs of the Drowned trilogy are both. Cool. Epic fantasy. Some people say that it's grimdark rather than epic fantasy, but I always think that grimdark is a really tricky beast to try and pin down. So some people read it and say grimdark as fuck. Other people read it and go, there's no grimdark, it's got romance. So really, I would just say I never classed myself as writing grimdark. When I was writing Goblin, I never thought I was writing grimdark. I don't mind the label, but I don't want to get stuck within that label at the same time. So I tend to say epic fantasy that has a lot of guts in it. And then I guess you'd have to say that I do write superhero fantasy, because of the Marvel book, which you have to learn a whole set of new rules, because all of a sudden people can do that shit where you're like, oh yeah, you're just going to backflip out of the way. No one would do that in a real fight. What if you were Lady Sif, actually?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, and like things like being able to pick up boulders the size of cars and throw them at people. It's you have to get a whole range of new physics in your head to be able to do that. And then I also write horror. So I write for Black Library in the Age of Sigmar universe, and also their Warhammer horror series. Cool. So we've got Gothball Hollow, which is my first Warhammer horror, cool. Which is the first of a 4-book series, I believe. So there are other authors writing books 2 and 3, and then I'm going to write the final book. So that's quite cool. And then I've also got stories in Inferno. I've got a novella in Covens of Blood, and then like various other Age of Sigmar shorts as well. It's all firmly horror. It's all firmly fantasy, but it either brings in elements of horror or it brings in elements of, superheroes and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool. I always love how you and Richard both seem to have a good grasp on like the horror genre, but fantasy at the same time, and then, really conglomerate them into something very unique. Where like me, I'm like, I like that type of horror and fantasy. I like that type of I don't know, that's my type of horror. I'm not really into, I would say, like a traditional horror genre where like I do enjoy Stephen King, and things like that. It's not really like my thing necessarily, but I love when someone is able to bring in the scariness into a fantasy setting. I feel like you can also do a lot of cool and interesting things. So yeah, that's super cool. So for that third one, so what is your Godblind trilogy about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Okay, I mean, the idea itself was very much an evolution. So over those 13 years that I talked about, every time I rewrote it, it got a little bit more realistic. It sort of it moved away from its high fantasy roots, which always makes me laugh, the fact that it was originally a high fantasy and ended up being a grimdark. There's not much of a difference, but it was originally like the guiding premise way back when was it was always going to be the story of an invasion and a conquest, and it was always going to be an ensemble cast. I like writing multi-point of view narratives. I find they give me an absolute ton of freedom. I can really sort of create characters that complement each other and characters that are real sort of foils for each other, and where this one has a weakness, this one has a strength, and how do those characters interact. I really enjoy doing that. So the finished version, the Godblind trilogy, is it is the story of the invasion of the kingdom of Realpor by their ancient enemies, the Miraces, who live up in their western mountains, and they are so as the Miraces sweep down from the mountains, bringing their very, very bloodthirsty religion with them. They are confronted with Realpor's standing army, and also a bunch of like ragtag civilian warriors who are just desperate to try to do anything they can to slow down the advance. The Watchers, who are the civilians, are, they're led by well, their chief is called Lim, but his adopted brother Dom is what is known as the Calistar, and he's a sort of a prophet, so he can see little glimpses of the future, so he can see what's coming.
Oh, that's cool.
But not necessarily in a way that he understands or anyone else understands. And every time he receives this information, it takes a terrible toll on him. So he's very much a reluctant prophet. He would give it up tomorrow if he could, because being spoken to by the gods is immensely violating and immensely painful and draining. And he doesn't want to be that person. All he wanted to be was a warrior like his brother. And instead, he is basically cursed with a gift, that pretty much knocks him out of the fighting quite a lot.
Mm.
So it's how he deals with it. And then there's as I said, it's an ensemble cast. There's a bunch of different characters, and it's just how each of them deals with what is given to them over the course of the trilogy and what happens to them and the choices they have to make. So one of the things that I'm always really interested in is, what kind of person are you when you are at your worst? So when you are in absolute extremes, when you are running for your life, you haven't eaten in 3 days, you haven't slept in 2 days, you're wounded, and someone falls next to you, are you the person who runs on by, or are you the person who stops and helps? So I've always been really interested in those questions, and by having a big cast of characters, I could play out the answers in lots of different ways. So yeah, it's basically it's story of an invasion. It's also a religious war. It's also an examination to a certain extent of power and privilege and prejudice. And it's got a lot of really cool fight scenes in it, because that's one of my favorite things to write.
That's fair. My friend always says, he's like, I just want to write fight scenes. I'm like, well, I don't think anybody's going to read it if there's not some sort of talking or something.
It needs to be a bit of a plot, but yeah.
No, I definitely understand that. I'm always like trying to get through other things. I'm like, okay, like I'm a martial artist, so like the fight scenes are always, I feel like, really easy. Like at least I know what I'm going to put on there,
Yeah.
I'm never wondering about that. I'm always like, oh yeah, they could do this and this and this, and then I have to like get to like the other part, and I'm like, okay, and I have to like take my time. But yeah, I definitely understand that. Fight scenes, I think, are definitely the best thing to write, in my opinion. But
they're quite often the easiest, as long as you know the outcome.
Oh yeah, totally.
Just a case of how do you make it cool but also realistic.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Unless you're writing superhero fantasy, in which case it doesn't have to be realistic at all.
You like totally blew my mind with that. I never even thought of that, in terms of, like what could they do, differently. And I do feel like your writing would be totally different then. So that's like Jeffrey Haskell. I was reading his Arsenal series, and I was like, oh, like he did I think people like it because it's a lot like Arsenal's a lot like Iron Man. She flies and has this suit. It's so interesting, where like he brings in the physics and things. I'm like, oh yeah, that really wouldn't be possible, unless you were somebody like Sif or Thor, even if you did have a suit, and yeah, it really added to my writer's brain. I was like, oh, I never considered that. So that's totally true. Yeah, it'd be interesting to write from that perspective as like Sif or Thor or Hamdel or Brynhild, one of them. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, I did find I think the thing I found the hardest with writing those is the idea that because they are basically immortal, where does the sense of threat come from?
Yeah.
If they don't die, or it takes an awful amount of work to kill them, there's no threat, So it was sort of thinking around that and being like, okay, well, what constitutes a threat when you're an immortal goddess who can teleport and is an absolute badass kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, I think that's
so. That was quite tricky to think through. But it also meant that, like, so near the start of the book, Lady Sif fights a demon from Muspelheim.
Oh.
And I was like, right, okay, well, that's a big bad. That's gonna be really difficult for her. But it just meant that you could get in like backflips and all this kind of stuff, and they're like fighting aerially and stuff like that. But the threat needed to be big enough that you felt a definite sense of danger for her well-being.
Yeah.
So yes, that's been really interesting, is coming at it from that kind of an angle.
That makes sense. You don't want to do that Superman thing, right? Where he's always just punching his way out.
Yeah, as the bullets are bouncing off him.
Yeah, you feel like he doesn't actually, like that was like I remember one episode of Lois and Clark Adventures that Brandon Sanderson talked about, where like they were trying, like he had something going wrong with him and Lois, and he was like trying to fix it, and the whole episode is pretty much like him trying to fix this like human problem he was having. And then, you know, his Krypton side, he went and these guys were trying to, you know, to kill him and this and that, and then he went and destroyed their giant city-sized robot in like 2 seconds by doing X, Y, and Z. And, you know, I'm always like, oh yeah, it was a very interesting episode, you know, but I definitely think, you know, because of the human side of him, but I was like, you know, from a writer's standpoint, it's like it never felt like he was in danger there, you know,
Yeah.
or that it was there wasn't a sense of accomplishment, I guess is the best way to put it. So
Yeah.
I could
It's just
definitely
something
see
else
that.
for him to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see where that would be really hard. I was thinking when I read oh, totally blanking on which one of Richard's there. I didn't read the Head of Mjolnir. I read the other one. But I remember, like, you know, when like I thought there were times where I was like, you know, before when I was like reading the premise of everything with Heimdall, I'm like, well, Heimdall's a god, you know, I'm like, he's a big, strong warrior. And I was like very, you know, surprised at, you know, the situations that, you know, Richard put him in. And it definitely, you know, I assume, you know, with Sif, it's the same, you know, it's like you have to find that balance. I would find that hard personally. I find that hard with certain godlike characters that I have. You know, like how do you come up with, you know, a villain or a monster or a situation that, you know, you do feel that, you know, they've accomplished something after, particularly if they are a god. I feel like that's very difficult to do.
Yeah, it definitely takes you sort of have to think in a different direction, and so it's not only that you're learning all like the new physics, and yeah, actually is okay for them to do that, and you know, it doesn't matter if they need to fall 60 feet, they're just going to land on their feet and be absolutely fine, you know, they're not even going to twist their ankle, kind of thing.
That's true. Yeah.
So you have to, you know, you've got to take all of that into account, but then you've also got to think, okay, well, if you can do that, then what on earth is going to hurt that person? Yeah. But it's also fun, you know, it really stretches the writing brain to actually make those decisions and think, would that work? And, you know.
Yeah, got my writer brain working now. Like, oh. I got this one group called Champions, and I got like the light side and dark side, like Lightborn and Shadowborn. So I'm like always trying to figure out like how to, you know, how to show that they're souped up, you know, humans or creatures or beings or whatever, but then also do the same thing. So now, yeah, you got me thinking like, never considered the superhero landing. Like, of course they do superhero landings. They can actually do it. Whereas I can barely even fall from like, you know, 4 feet anymore on my feet. I think I just went on a hill before I got in here. I think it was like 3 feet, and I was like, oh man, that was tough, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really funny. So you write for Black Library. So just for our audience, so what is that, and how can we find your stories there?
Okay. So Black Library is the publishing arm of Games Workshop, which obviously is super famous for Warhammer 40k. Age of Sigmar is their relatively newer fantasy side of the publishing and the gaming arm. So I mean, I'm published in there under the same name, Anna Stevens. I think I've got 4 short stories. Oh, cool. The Daughters of Cain novella, which was cool because I got to write a homicidal she-elf.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
which cool. Like was, I mean, how do you make a homicidal she-elf who is given to basically chaos, and make her the heroine, you know? So
that's awesome.
That was interesting. And then there's also the Warhammer horror novel, wherever that's gone, I've lost it. So yeah, I mean, just, you know, just look for Anna Stevens on your Black Library website, and you'll see my stuff.
Oh, cool. I actually was able to find it. I don't know why. I don't know what I was doing wrong before. So for our audience, I will make sure that is part of Anna's descriptions. So I did find that right for her story. So
cool.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'm jealous. I absolutely love Warhammer, and I just like my own fantasy world I'm like writing now, where it's like I would call it it's not really medieval fantasy, but like their version of that time. But like I'm also going to eventually move forward like Brandon Sanderson did, like 2,000 years in the future. And then I want to do like a Warhammer thing where like all my old spells and, you know, all these things that happen, I want to take it out in outer space and kind of see what happens. I played what did we play? We played Blackstone Keep or whatever, and
yeah,
oh my gosh, that just like you just feel like you get that exploration piece, and there's the, you know, the mystery of the alien technology and the keeps or whatever they're called. I just like, it was just so cool. I just was like, oh, I have to do something like that someday. So I'm very jealous. And we've been doing a lot of I actually picked up quite a few books for Warhammer recently from Black Libraries. I think I have like 3 or 4. So definitely, I haven't read any of them yet. My friend's we're waiting for book club, so I'm like really anxious. So we'll have to put yours on there. So I'm really excited about that.
Cool.
That's super cool. So you've gotten, you know, like, so you know, written for Black Library, Marvel, you know, so I feel like you know, what, like other than Star Wars and, you know, one or other two, you pretty much got everything, you know, of, of the major ones, you know. I mean, I feel like Dune's making a comeback, you know, so maybe, but yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, you know, I mean, if Lucasfilm wants to hit me up,
I was just gonna say,
I'm available. You know,
we're doing.
I'm sure they watch this podcast.
We're doing so many pitches this week. Like we're pitching you for Star Wars, and then oh my gosh, I had like 2 other ones. You know, people were just pitching random stuff. So I'm gonna laugh if one of the 3 of you from this week actually gets something from the podcast. Like
that would be amazing.
I will literally die a happy man, because I'm always like, I just want to have somebody go viral for something and just to like sell out of their books. Like that's always been my goal for the podcast. I was like, I don't care if it takes, you know, a year or 10 years. I was like, I just want to help somebody, you know, get to that next level. For me, that would just feel like super, super cool. So yeah, if anybody from Lucasfilms or, you know, anybody from Disney is watching, you know, feel free to send Anna a contract. So
yeah.
She's already got the sci-fi / fantasy stories down clearly, and that's what Star Wars is. So might as well just send over the contract. So as long as I get a first copy, then we'll all be okay. So but how did it feel writing such legendary characters as Sif and Brunhild? I mean, I gotta imagine, like, just from a mythological standpoint, that is super cool. But I feel like the Marvel comics in particular really showcased, you know, these powerful mythological women and, you know, really put them on a different pedestal. So I just got to know, like, how did it feel working on 2 legendary characters like that?
It excuse me, sorry. It was really strange, actually, because it was the Aconite Books, who are the tie-in official publishers. They put out basically like an open submissions call, and I thought, and because obviously Aconite, they write for a lot of gaming worlds as well, so Legend of the 5 Rings and BioShock, I think, and Legion, you know, all sorts of stuff. And I'm not a particularly big gamer. So I was a little bit panic stricken. I was thinking, well, what if they asked me to write for something and I haven't even heard of it, let alone, you know, I'm just gonna have to blag. I'm just gonna have to pretend. I'll watch like 12 hours of walkthroughs and I'll be fine.
That's fair.
So when I sent in my submission pack, I just said, look, this is who I am. This is what I've already written. I would absolutely love to write for Marvel, but I know that everyone is going to say this. But if you think, you know, if you want to have a conversation, give me a call, kind of thing. And they emailed back and they were like, yeah, we're really interested. Really glad you submitted. You know, so let's set up a Skype call or whatever. So I was chatting with the editor, Lottie, and she just said, so we'd really like a Brunhild the Valkyrie novel. And I just kind of went, I'm sorry, what? And she was like, yeah, or a Lady Sif novel, you know, from Marvel. And I was like, why are you talking to me? Why are you talking to me about Marvel? Kind of, you know, and I honestly did not expect it. in the slightest. So I think I might have been a little bit drunk on adrenaline, because I went, well, what about a Brunhild and Lady Sif novel? And they went, perfect. And then I was like, oh shit, now I've got to write it. So yeah, it's such a privilege. I mean, it is genuinely a privilege to be trusted with characters like that. And I mean, actually, I was trusted with a character in Gothgall Hollow, the Warhammer horror novel as well, who doesn't appear right until the very end, so I can't spoil it. But that was also, you know, what we want to do is we want to do such and such with such and such. So yeah, so you know, I've been really lucky with the, you know, the tie-in stuff that I'm doing, that I am getting, you know, these sort of remarkable opportunities. And I mean, I sort of bought a lot of the back copies of the comics, and sort of went through those and thought, oh God, I don't have to write the whole book in Norse, in like fake Norse, do I? But they were quite happy that I didn't have to do that, because I was like, 80,000 words of Dawart is it's going to be exhausting for everyone involved.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was a huge privilege, and it is a whole heap of fun as well, because you know, they're both really complex characters, and Marvel were very happy for me to introduce nuances to them as well. So I mean, Lady Sif the Reckless is, you know, she's known for her reckless nature, but also for her really strong sense of duty. So it was really nice to sort of create a tension between those two. You know, her duty versus her recklessness, the fact that she's utterly devoted to Odin and Thor and the rest of Asgardia, but at the same time, if she thinks she can do something, she's going to go and do it. And that's where her impatience and her recklessness comes in. And at what point does her duty stop her, or even worse, at what point does her recklessness make her ignore her duty? So being able to explore stuff like that, and to have Marvel's blessing was just, you know, it was so exciting. And then obviously, you know, Brunhild's complete dedication to her duty as the leader of the Valkyrior, and you know, the book is called The Serpent and the Dead for a reason, you know. So Brunhild is faced with the possibility that she's failing in her duty. And she bases a lot of who she is as a person and her own self-worth off the fact that Odin chose her to be the leader of the Valkyries. So when she realizes that she might be fucking that up, she's just like, you know, she's almost undone by it. And then she gets partnered up with Sif, and Sif's like, let's just fucking go. And, you know, it just introduces a really nice dynamic between, are they going to go rogue? Are they going to go off script kind of thing? Or are they going to remember themselves when it matters, and who they are and what they stand for? So yeah, it was nice, because it was great to be able to take these iconic characters and then maybe push them into doing something that everybody knows they shouldn't do, and see whether they're actually going to go through with it or not. So yeah, it's so much fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. I've always liked Sif personally. Brunhild I like more. I've been researching Brunhild in particular for urban fantasy. I got a young girl that finds out she's like a Valkyrie, descended from a Valkyrie. She's got to take her place, kind of thing. So I was doing a lot of research. So when you know, when people were sharing, you know, your book, I was like, oh, that's so cool, because I was like, oh, I love Sif, and I think that was what people were talking about. And then when I saw that Brunhild was there, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, well, that's even cooler now. So yeah,
Double trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Man, that'd make a really good t-shirt. Marvel, are you listening? Yeah, I would definitely buy that. for sure. So what is one thing that you wish you could go back and say to your past writing self?
Sorry, can you see my dog? My dog's decided to
Oh, hey.
come and say hi. Look,
We love familiars on the show. Everybody's always like, "Oh, sorry, my cat." I was like, "Oh, you're fine." I was like,
Yeah,
"These will
sorry,
probably go up now."
I had a butt in my face. What was the question?
Oh, sorry. So what is one thing you wish you could go back and tell your past writing self?
Yeah. Um, you know what? Because we were talking about the fact that I was really stubborn and didn't give up. I probably wouldn't say anything to do anything differently,
Okay,
because it
that's
did
fair.
work out in the end.
Yeah.
It did work out in the end.
We're about to get you a Star Wars contract for crying out loud.
Exactly.
So I feel like you're totally fine right now.
I don't know. I think maybe one thing I wouldn't, because I did kind of hide away the fact that I was a writer for a long time. Like not a lot of people knew about it.
Gotcha.
And I think I'd probably just be more confident now about telling people. You know, I mean, just because you're not published doesn't mean you're not a writer. It doesn't mean you're not an author. You know, and you've got to, if you don't have that faith in yourself to start with, then you know there's a possibility that you won't ever get anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd probably say just, you know, own it a bit more and be a bit prouder of it.
I think that's a fabulous answer. I think that's a great thing. I wish that I go back in time and just tell myself like just write a little bit more. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I always get distracted by other people's books, so I'm trying to be a little bit more proactive. But I think that's great. Though. I think a lot of people can really relate to that, because like I met a guy the other day and he was like, "Oh, what do you do?" I was like, "Oh, I'm a teacher," you know, and then we were discussing things, you know, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you know, I do a podcast. I like to write, you know," and he was like, "Oh," he's like, "I'm a writer," and I was like, "Oh, really?" And like, but at first when he said it, he sounded like he was like ashamed of it, like,
Yeah.
"I'm a writer," and I'm like, "No, it's fine." Like, so I definitely understand that. I think a lot of people, it's weird how there's such a like not everybody can, you know, everybody can write, you know, but I don't think everybody can write like a book, you know, otherwise I think it's like 10,000 a day and, you know, it's published on Amazon or whatever, but I still, I mean, I rarely find people, you know, I think I've met 4 people in my town that I live in now. And one of them was actually abroad, actually, by my mother-in-law. So really I've only met 3 in my town that write, just in general, let alone write 2 of those, right? For one for horror, one for fantasy, you know, and not published. So I definitely, that's why I do podcasts, because, you know, my wife's like, "Oh, you're talking about writing so much, like go talk to an author." You know, and you know, because it is hard, you know, it's like being a teacher, but you have to go online to, you know, find people to talk to about teaching. You know, I'm a martial artist and I love talking to other martial artists, you know, but it's like martial arts is more common than writing. You figure everybody could write, but they don't. So I definitely think that a lot of people, you know, could definitely relate to your answer, because for some reason there's still a negative connotation with being a writer or an author. I think it's that
There
whole
is.
not
There
making
is.
money thing for most people, but it's like you're still creating, you're still doing something. It's not like people go, "Oh, you're a painter," you know, like, you know what I mean? Like I know that, you know, people might have a negative connotation for artists or something too, but I don't know. I hear that more for writing for some reason than,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
interesting.
And then the opposite is, as soon as you do get published, instead of, "Oh, well, you're not published, you're not making any money from it," is, "Oh, you are published, you must be rich."
Yeah. There's no in between.
No. In fact, you're probably so rich, I'm going to pirate your book. No. Stop it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh yeah, scream into the void on that on TikTok and on Facebook. I feel like that's another thing too, is I'm always like, please review an author, and someone says something, I go, "Did you review it though?" And like a guy the other day on TikTok, he goes, who I talk to a lot, because he's like, "Oh, I read that," and he's like, "Oh, I don't review." And I'm like, "Why don't you review?" I'm like, "You're literally leaving money for an author on the table, you know." And so the other day he tagged me in something, he goes, "Don't worry, I reviewed it." I laughed so hard. So then I had to be that guy. I had to go, "Did you review the other 200 books that you read last year?"
Like, just keep going. Keep
like,
it
"I'm working on it." Exactly. So who are some authors that you read who we should be reading?
Oh my God. That is such a question. And I
I
have
know.
so many people on my list. Right. Okay, I'm gonna just rattle them off, so people are gonna have to like just slow you down or something, like keep
well, that's the
pausing.
nice thing. Yeah, just pause and then you can replay it. That's totally fine. It helps us with the minutes on YouTube too, so that's fine.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna say books that I have probably read in the last year or so. The authors: Foz Meadows, Lee Mandello, Shelley Parker Chan, Tasha
Ooh.
Suri, Fonda Lee, Jen Williams, Octavia Butler, Kim Unsu, um, um, uh, Andrea Stewart,
Oh yeah.
Stuart Turton, Stuart Hotston. That worked out well. Sam Hawke, Devin Madsen, Melissa Caruso, Rebecca Kwang, Alex Harrow, Rowena Miller, Evan Winter.
Oh yeah.
God.
Those are some really good ones.
I probably could keep going, but
those are
quite a few
excellent.
there.
Those are excellent recommendations. So make sure at this point you pause, go back, listen to it again, write them all down, go buy all their books and review them. Wow, those are some great ones right there. I was just at the library and I was trying to find Richard Swan, his first book, and it was like everybody only had book 2. Yeah, everybody only had book 2 or whatever, and I was like, no, I need to read book 1. And I was finally able to find it. Like somebody must have just brought it back to the library, and it was like we went searching at like 6 different bookstores, like indie bookstores, when I was out and about, and I was just like, I gotta have it now. My wife's like, well, just do this. I'm like, no, I'm like, I really want to read it like physically. And so I was like being, kind of like childish, but I finally was able to find a physical copy. I just wanted to see it in person, but yeah, like everybody had book 2 and I was like, no, I need book 1. So yeah, I just I feel like sometimes it's really hard though, like the other day I was there and I was like, it was so hard to pick now, I was like, well, I only have time for one library book this month because I got all these other ones, that I'm reading. And I'm like, where do you go from here? And I feel like the last few years in particular, last 4 years in particular with, traditionally published and indie publishing, it's like they just have both just, even with the pandemic, just had so many great stories come out. And it's like, we were at this one bookstore and I was like, I'm going to try and just do 4. It's about all I could fit in the car because since we're on vacation, I'm like, what do I do? Do I buy, She Who Became the Sun? Do I buy, it was just like, there were like 10 and my wife's like, there's no way all these are going to fit on the shelf, let alone bring them in the car. And I was like, it was really hard to pick. I literally never do this, but I was like, I waited till we were about to leave for vacation because I already had enough to read just to decide for 3 days on what I was going to buy. And I felt like I was leaving children behind, like,
I know. Yeah. It's so painful. It's so painful. I mean, it's like, I'm trying to write, I'm trying to work, I'm trying to do, wrangle the dog, do all this other stuff. And I'm like, I just want to read. I just want to stop and read. But yeah, I mean, honestly, since becoming an author, I read less than before.
Far less.
And I think as well, I'm far more likely to not finish a book as well. Whereas before I would grit my teeth and grind it out and get to the end. Now, if I get, 10%, 30%, 50% in, and if it just suddenly stops working for me, I just have to put it down. Because there's so many books out there. And, I'm never going to be able to read them all, which is a source of unending disappointment.
But,
I mean, I used to be a massive rereader. I used to reread everything. I mean, the number of times I've read The Lord of the Rings, the number of times I've read Green River Rising, the number of times I've read Discworld. And now it's like, it's only if I'm going on holiday, I'll take, I'll take 2 brand new books and a comfort reread. But other than that, I don't reread. And also I haven't been on holiday in 3 years because of the pandemic. So.
That's fair. Well, that's why we were like 2 weeks. I was like, yes, please. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get all this writing and reading done. And then I got through like the first half, I got through almost all of H.M. Long's Hall of Smoke. And then, I had to finish up part of my novella. So I did a chunk of that. Then I went and read like a bunch more, and then I got like stuck on something else for writing. So I was like, oh, I need to just like maybe next time do 1 week of writing and then 1 week of reading or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny. Well, those are some great recommendations. So our audience will be full of reading for a while, but make sure you guys are reviewing. So for that last one there, do you have any promos, news, updates, current projects you would like to share with us? You did say, you got a book 2 coming here for,
I do. Yeah.
Marvel, so that's really exciting.
So book 2 of the Songs of the Drowned trilogy, first of all, the Jaguar Path is being published in February
that's exciting.
Of next year. And then book 3, because there's been a big gap between 1 and 2, book 3 should then be out in December of next year, so that we can sort of compress back down to get the trilogy finished. Awesome. So Jaguar Path next February, and then so the super secret Marvel novel that we're not allowed to talk about should be out around about May, I believe, next year.
Oh, that's cool.
I've also got some projects in the work with Black Library.
Oh, that's awesome.
That we're sort of at the negotiation stage and the outlining stage. So I don't really have dates for those. I might have a novel out with them towards the end of next year.
Oh, that's cool.
But I'm not sure on that yet. And then finally, I have decided to start an online writing course, which I'm hoping to launch next month. Sorry. It's SFF specific, and it's a world building course.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's an 8-week online course. So there's going to be 3 sort of tiers. You can either just do a self-study, or you can do group coaching, or you can do one-to-one coaching with me.
Oh, that's awesome.
So all of the details for that are on my website at the moment, which is anna-stevens.com. There's also somewhere on there that you can sign up to the writing course newsletter, so that you can get all the details about when it's going live and stuff like that. So that's the first one. I'm hoping to do a few others. I want to do a characterization one, and then cool. I might do some mini courses like writing fight scenes and
that's really neat,
stuff like that. So yeah,
you have to do more in the future, because literally like the next 2 months is like my worst time. I had that happen with a friend. He's like, oh, do you want? I was like, I want to do that so bad. I was like, but if I do, I was like, my wife's gonna kill me. I was like, I'll have to like stop doing something. Like I was like, I have to stop interviewing or something for a while. I was like, I just don't want. I have so many friends that have book 2s and book 3s coming out that were like, hey, I really want to come back, and I could use some help. And I was like, well, so I told her, I was like, I won't do anything till after, like November. So yeah, that's really awesome. But I'll make sure to take a look at that in the future. I got to sign up for a newsletter still too. I keep about that. So, but for our audience, just want to remind everybody, you can find all of Hannah's links in the description. I'm like a detective. I think it's my historian background. I will literally find every good thing that she has, and I will put it in that description for you. So I'll try to make sure, I'll make a note here in a second, and I'll try and make sure to remember to put your course link in there as a separate link. That way people can click right on it. I'll put a little tag in there too.
Great stuff.
Thank you. Really easily able for people to find. Well, Hannah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed having you. I love your books. So it's always nice when I can get an author on. And I always really enjoy too talking to authors and then either rereading or reading something new that I haven't read of theirs yet, because it ends up, I just get a lot more out of it from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's one reason why I do podcasts with people. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's been great fun. It's been great fun. I've enjoyed it.
Anytime you want to come and chit chat, maybe in the future we can get you, Richard, on for a little Marvel talk or something like that.
That would be cool.
I talked to him about that. Yeah, I talked about that in the winter. He's like, yeah, let her know and let me know. So I was like, yeah, that just like, I'm doing some book reviews right now. I got a couple of his, and I got some other people. So I'm trying to get yours on there too before then. That way we could link everything up together and send people to the book review and this interview. So I think it'd be
Yeah,
cool
that'd be
to,
great. I'm definitely
yeah.
up for that. Yeah,
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I will let them know and I will get a hold of you guys here in the fall. And that sounds excellent.
cool.
All right. Well, you have a great rest
Let's
of the
do it.
day, Anna. And I hope that,
You
I get to
too.
talk to you soon on social media, my friend.
Yeah, we will. We will.
Excellent. Have a good rest of the day.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.